Back in the old paper and pencil days, creating an ellipse wasn't easy. It usually required the use of a template or various sized French curves. Fortunately, those days are long behind us, as AutoCAD has provided us a tool to easily create an ellipse of any size we can imagine. Now we're going to open a drawing. I'm going to come up to my Open icon, click. In the Select File dialog, I'm going to go into our Exercise Files folder, and I'm going to select the number 2 drawing, Ellipse. We'll click Open to bring that guy up on screen. Now on screen we can see a diagram of an ellipse. One way to look at an ellipse is it is a squashed circle. It is a circle that has 2 different diameters. One diameter represents the major axis, and one diameter represents the minor axis. When we create an ellipse in AutoCAD, we're going to be picking 3 points. The first 2 points that we pick represent our major axis, and the third point that we pick represents 1/2 of our minor axis. Let me show you what I mean. If I want to create an ellipse, I'm going to come over and click my ellipse icon in the Draw toolbar. And then I'm going to come over and AutoCAD asks me to specify axis endpoint. Remember, the first 2 points that we set represent our major axis. So I'm going to free pick some points on screen. I'm just going to pick 1 point right here. My ortho happens to be locked. I'll take and pull over in this direction and I'll click again. Notice that sets my major axis, or the width of my ellipse. And now the third point that I click is going to represent 1/2 of my minor axis, because notice where my line is being pulled from. It's being pulled from the center. I'll pick 1 more point on screen and I've created an ellipse. Let me pan over. I've got a couple of ellipses. That might not be good grammar. It sounds better for me though. Let's try and recreate this geometry on screen. I'm going to come over and launch my ellipse command. I'm going to pick a point on screen to represent the first axis endpoint. Now my ortho is already locked, so I'm going to pull to the right, and I'm going to type in a distance of 42 inches and hit enter. I just set the width of that ellipse, or the major axis of that ellipse. Now I need to set the minor axis. Remember, we're only going to give half the distance for the minor axis because we're pulling from the center. My minor axis has a dimension of 28 inches, so I'm going to type in 14 inches since I'm entering half the distance, and I'll hit enter. I have just recreated that ellipse. Let's recreate the other ellipse. This time we're going to look at one of the sub-options of the ellipse command. We're going to look at the center option. I'm going to come over and launch the ellipse command. And notice if we look at the command line, I can see my sub-options, arc and center. I'd like to draw this ellipse from the center. So I'm going to right-click and select the sub-option center. Now AutoCAD's asking me to specify the center of my ellipse. I'll pick a point on screen. The only difference between drafting an ellipse from the center or from the end is that when I give the major axis, I'm going to give half the distance because I'm pulling from the center. And I know that my major axis has a dimension of 30 inches, so I'm going to type in half of that since I'm drawing this from the center. I'll type in 15 inches, enter. And then the distance to my other axis, my minor axis happens to be 20 inches. I'm going to type in half of that. I'm going to type in 10 inches and hit enter. Let's try and use the ellipse command in a practical example. If I back up a little bit and pan over, I've got my unfinished bathroom drawing. I have completed my shower stall and my whirlpool tub. If I zoom in on my countertop area, I'd like to have 2 basins. I already have 1 created. Let's recreate the other basin on this side of the counter. So I need to find the center. I'm going to do that by creating a little sketch geometry. I'm going to create a line. So I'm going to come over and launch the line command. And I happen to have a running object snap set for endpoint. So I'm going to create a line from the endpoint here. And I'm going to come down. Now my ortho's locked. Don't worry about that. I can still get my endpoint. I'm going to come down and draw the line to the endpoint here. When I'm all done, I'll hit escape. I hope you'll agree, if I click on this line, that the midpoint of this line represents the center of that area. I'm going to create each ellipse from the midpoint of that line. Let me hit escape to deselect the line. I'm going to come over and launch the ellipse command. I'm going to right-click and access the center option. Now, where would I like my center of my ellipse? I would like it at the midpoint of this line. Now, I don't have a running object snap set for midpoint, so I'm going to have to grab that guy from the toolbar. I'm going to come over and click midpoint, and then I'm going to click my line. I am now creating this ellipse from that midpoint. So I'm going to pull to the right, and my major axis has a dimension of 20, so I'm going to type in half 10 inches, enter. And my minor axis has a dimension of 18 inches. I'm going to type in 9 inches, enter. Let's do one more ellipse. I'm going to right click, go right back into the ellipse command. We're going to do the center option again. So we'll right click and select center. Specify center of ellipse. Just like a circle, an ellipse has a center point, and I have a running object snap set to center. So if I hover, if I move my cursor close to the ellipse, I can grab the center of the first one. So let me just click and grab the center, and we'll finish this up. The major axis of the smaller ellipse is 14 inches, so I'm going to type in 7 inches, enter. And then I'm going to pull in the direction of the minor axis. That has a dimension of 12 inches, so I'm going to type in 6 inches, enter. Once you understand the concept of the major and minor axis, creating an ellipse is as easy as drawing a circle.